Hello, everybody. Welcome to the It Hurts to Mom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose, and today we're talking about not only running a business with chronic pain, but even using your pain to your advantage. Our guest is Grace Scott. She's a social media agency owner who suffers from endometriosis. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren.
Of course. So, you told us what your chronic pain is, but how long have you had it, and kind of has it affected your life in the past?
So I started getting fatigue and cramps sort of when I was an early teenager, and at the time I put it down basically to just being something that every woman is going to have to suffer every month, and that everybody goes through that. But
Mhm.
what I didn't realize is the extent to the amount of pain that I was feeling actually wasn't normal. And the older that I got, the worse it seemed to get. So it got to the point, for example, when I was about 20 and at university, where I couldn't do a whole day without having to have a nap at some point and breaking things up, or I wouldn't go a single day without experiencing pain. And I think often when we talk about chronic pain, and people that don't suffer with chronic pain maybe don't understand the extent to how painful it is. So
Mhm.
I'm talking about pain where I take like as many different painkillers as safely possible, have a hot water bottle, and it still wouldn't be enough. So sometimes pain would make me physically sick, as an
Mhm.
example. And that was really starting to impact my life, but I didn't know what endometriosis was, and I basically didn't know what was going on. And then 4 years ago, when I was 24, I went to hospital with this pain because I was throwing up everything I was eating, and they diagnosed it as a appendicitis and took my appendix out. But when they took my appendix out, they found blood in my organs, which is this is something that happens with endometriosis. It means that your endometriotal, it's very difficult to say, lining grows where it shouldn't, and rather than shedding, it causes blood where there shouldn't be blood, and your organs get stuck together. So that's what was causing my pain. But they just put on the notes, we've drained the blood, it's appendicitis, goodbye, you can get on with your life now. And so after that, I was doing a bit more research, which I think a lot of people with chronic pain do, because it's really difficult to find answers, and you're sort of thinking, I don't know what's wrong with me, why doesn't everybody else suffer with this, am I making this all up, questions like that. And it was my mum that brought up, do you think it could be endometriosis? I started googling the symptoms and the pain, the fatigue, the amount of blood I'd lose every month, and sometimes just randomly all sort of came together. And so I started going to the GP, our doctor, and saying to them, these are all the problems I have. Please, could you help me? I think it might be
Mhm.
this. And I was met with a lot of dismissal. I think on average, it takes 8 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis, but it was ruining my life, to be honest. I was so
Mhm.
persistent. I think it took me maybe about 6 months to get referred to an endometriosis specialist at a hospital. And when I saw her, I just so happened on that day to have a huge breakdown, which actually was a
Mhm.
blessing in retrospect, because it showed her how much of an impact that was having. And she sent me for an operation, and she found endometriosis, which was a relief. I mean, it's never great to be diagnosed with a chronic condition, but I
Mhm.
started to think I was going mad, like imagining these
Mhm.
things. So to finally have an answer, but I would say in retrospect, thinking about it, I probably suffered with symptoms for at least 15 years before
Mhm.
understanding what was happening.
Yeah, I know a lot of us, especially people with fibromyalgia, which is one of the things I have, it takes years to get diagnosed, and you do get a lot of dismissal with chronic pain, no matter what kind of chronic pain you suffer
Yeah.
from. I went in with a list of, just symptoms, probably like 15 or 20 symptoms to my primary care, and I was told it was all just related to depression. And I
Yeah.
mean, it was things like, heat intolerance and just random things. I'm like, that has nothing. So I was completely dismissed, and she didn't even read the symptoms. She just glanced, it's like, oh, it's just your depression.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and
ridiculous.
that's so interesting because one of the responses that I had was that, do you think that this is a psychological problem? And the answer is, like I'm telling you that I can't get out of bed or do normal things because of the amount of pain I'm in, and it whether or not you think I'm thinking of it in my head, it's not, and I think to be repetitively met with that dismissal uh, will eventually lead people into a depression and psychological problems. So, one thing leads to the other. And it's sad to hear that you've had that experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what I gather, just talking to people and, reading people's posts online, it happens a lot. So much dismissal, so much just there's nothing I can do for you, or it's all in your head, or it's not a big deal, or it's perfectly normal, when it's not normal to not be able to get out of bed, or not be able to move, or to have severe pain every single day, or even most days. That's not normal, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something I've learned from kind of taking endometriosis into my own hands is basically learning that the amount of stuff to do with our health and our bodies, so much of it isn't known about. So that's part of the problem when it comes to diagnosing things. I mean, particularly with women's health,
Mhm.
barely anything is understood, so I yeah, that nothing's understood, and I think that's why it takes so long to get answers.
Yeah, I think we're also just dismissed a lot because they do think, oh, it's just, in your head, it's not a big deal, or you're just being over dramatic, right?
Yeah, or it's your period and you just deal with it because that's your period. That's it.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know much about endometriosis.
Mhm.
And like I said, I have another guest coming on later today who has it. So do you have pain every day pretty much, or is it just during your periods?
So people with endometriosis tend to suffer chronic pain like throughout the month, but it will get much worse during their period. I was finding for a good few years that I'd have pain every day, and then certainly around my period, it would get to the point where it's debilitating. And things like, for example, the amount of blood I'd lose, I could have like a huge sanitary pad on
Mm.
and period blockers, and I just bleed through, even if it was for an hour. And obviously that affects things like your iron levels. So then you're tired, your body's
Mhm.
tired because you're in pain. And then because you're in pain, you feel more stressed. And then the stress leads to more pain. And that leads to blood. And it just goes round and round. I mean, I mentioned that not that much is understood about it, but it just as a summary. So the lining that you lose every month as a woman, that grows in different areas of my body. And because the blood can't shed and leave my body, it causes problems like organs sticking together and chronic pain. So
Mm.
people have endometriosis in different parts of their body, but when I had my operation, which is like the only way to diagnose it is to have a laparoscopy.
Oh,
Um, it was found on my bowel. Some people, if they've got it somewhere where it's safe to cut off or burn off, they'll do that during the operation. But because it was on my bowel, it would lead to other problems.
mm.
So it depends. And people have different sort of pain that they experience with endometriosis. Not everybody is, you know, debilitated in pain, but yeah.
So what happened after you got your diagnosis? Were you able to start managing your pain and your fatigue better?
So not instantly. The first thing that was a relief was that I wasn't imagining things. That was the main,
Yes.
that was such a relief. I remember, as soon as I sort of opened my eyes after surgery, the first thing I said is it endometriosis? Because I just wanted an answer.
Mhm.
She said, yeah, and it's here, and you've got it. So I felt like I had some answers. Then after that, and I'd recovered from the operation, which takes a while because they're cutting you open and things. I went back to the specialist and I was offered, you can go on birth control to manage the amount of blood that you lose. So you'll only have a period every 6 weeks. And I did that, and I went on birth control, and it helped with reducing the amount of blood I lost, but it helped with nothing to do with chronic pain or fatigue. And I think birth control is sort of a checkbox for people with endometriosis that the doctor can just tick off, because dealing with like chronic pain beyond saying have a hot water bottle and take painkillers is a bit more complex. So for about 3 or 4 years, my way of managing, and I'm using air quotation, was to take birth control and then still every day have naps, take days off work when I have pain, or take afternoons off. And I'm sure that you can understand that you constantly, and people with chronic illness as well, you constantly have to pick and choose between what you're going to do that day. So if I go and do the food shopping today, it means that I'm not going to go out for dinner with a friend because I don't have enough energy to do both of those things. So that was my way of managing it. And unsurprisingly, it made me utterly miserable, because you feel like you're not living life really. You're sort of just existing and getting on with things.
Right. And what you're talking about is the spoon theory. Are you familiar with the spoon theory? Yeah. And for those who aren't, it's basically a metaphor for people with chronic pain, chronic illness, where we have a certain number of spoons or quota of energy for the day. And every single task, whether it's getting dressed or taking a shower or going to work or making dinner or whatever, takes a spoon. And we can borrow spoons from tomorrow, but that means we're going to have fewer spoons tomorrow and be able to do even less. So everything that we do, we have to really be mindful about it. And I mean, I have to live that way too. It's like I'm gonna go on a field trip in May or in March with my daughter to Austin, Texas, the capital of Texas, because she really wants me to go, and she's still young enough. She wants me around, so I want to go. And I told my husband, why don't we, because it's on a Friday, why don't we just spend the whole weekend and have a family weekend in Austin? And his response, although it ticked me off at the time, was spot on. He said, why would we bother going down there as a family? Because you're just going to be in bed for the rest of the weekend if you do this.
Yeah.
And I know that he's right. I mean, both the energy it's going to take me and the amount of pain I'm going to be in. So I'm still choosing to do it. However, I know that I'm going to be in bed for a few days afterwards. So
yeah, and I think unless you sort of have that lived experience, it's impossible to understand what it's like. And also the feelings, I don't know if you feel this way as well, but I felt immensely guilty for not being able to do as many things as normal people would do. Or my partner Sam, who runs my agency with me, I used to feel incredibly guilty that I couldn't help him with, say, basic tasks around the house, because I just didn't have enough energy to do that. Even though he's completely understanding and I'm very lucky to have him, you still sort of internally feel that way.
Absolutely. I have a wonderful husband who never shames me for not doing the dishes or not doing anything during the day because I can't, but I still feel guilty. And I have a lot of mom guilt because I can't do certain things with my daughter that other moms can do. And I have to modify the things that I do with her, or limit the amount of time that I do things with her. And it sucks. It's hard.
Yeah, it's really, really tough.
So how are you managing your pain better now? Let's take the air quotes, hopefully, out of managing
Yeah. So
your pain and energy.
Yeah, so last year I think it'd been like four years or something since I was diagnosed, and I just got to the point where I was like, I'm not living my life like this anymore. However I can change things, I'll do it. So it got to the point where I was looking into having a hysterectomy privately.
Wow.
That's one of the options of it's not treatment, but it's one of the options of what might help. some people have a hysterectomy and they find that it doesn't make a difference. So I think the fact that I was thinking of that at 27, I'm 28 now, shows like the point to where it got for me to want to change things. But before I did that, I thought, let me just give a nutritionist a go. Let's just see, because I've tried the doctors, they've done their job to an extent, but it's not really helped. So I'm going to give a nutritionist a go. And I found one. She's called Claire, and her business is Transformation Nutrition, and she has absolutely transformed my life. She did like an audit of what I was eating, and she was like, right, you need to cut out gluten and dairy. These aren't things that will work for everybody with endometriosis, but this is what I found has worked for me. And basically cut out the amount of sugar you're having, the caffeine that you're having, alcohol, all of these things, just get rid of them. And since doing that, that has really, really limited the amount of time I spend in pain. It was tough because, to be honest, I really like cheese and chocolate and like cups of tea because I'm
yeah.
But I just, whatever it took, I just said to her, whatever it's going to take, I'll do it. I have to change my life because it's making me miserable. And so from doing that, which I think is such a blessing, it's had a huge impact, and it's given me more energy, which in turn has allowed me more time to sort of research and try and understand my body better, because rather than feel at war with my body now, I'm very disassociated from it. I think about it more so much as what can I give my body? What does it need for me to feel well, for my body to do what it needs to do? So I can, for example, before this call, I did a day of work. I went to a therapy appointment. I've put makeup on. And these things to me are a miracle. I would never, ever have been able to do that before. I think even the most simple things like going to work, coming home and cooking dinner, and then having a conversation with your significant other, to me is a world away from what it was before.
Yeah. So let's talk about the big question. How in the heck do you run a business with chronic pain and chronic illness? And how do you even say that you use it to your advantage? How do you use your pain to your advantage? How do you do all this?
Yeah, so when I started my business, one of the benefits of it, when I was suffering chronic pain, and more often, I'm not completely pain-free, but I'm more pain-free than in pain, and fatigue. The benefit was that because I worked for myself, I could just stop whenever I needed to. But now I don't have that issue as much. So I try to think of endometriosis as pushing me in a way to understand myself better. So a lot of business owners, because it's their business, will just want to work themselves to the ground because they're passionate about it, and they'll just think I can keep going, and that eventually leads to burnout, and people's bodies then decide for them it's now time for you to take a break, and it's going to take you a really long time. Whereas with endometriosis, I'm much more conscious about thinking about what my body needs and how to sort of act around it. So I wouldn't, for example, book back-to-back meetings in one day, because I know that might knacker me. And also, in general, nobody wants to do that in their life. I don't think I've met anybody that loves to have back-to-back meetings. So I think that's a benefit. I also think that it makes you prioritize things more. So very easy in life to sort of get bogged down with all these things that you think you should be doing or how you think you should be acting. But if you have a chronic illness, you need to think about what's the most important thing and then do that. So you're forced to prioritize things. And I think that's really good, because a lot of people struggle to do that and do everything. Whereas if you have a chronic illness, you're made to choose the most important thing and do that. And then I also touched on it earlier, but I think really getting to know yourself and what your body needs is really important. And I think that so many people take health for granted. I know that when I was a teenager, before all of this started, I really took feeling well for granted, and my health for granted, whereas now it's something I actively put first, you know, how I feel and what I need to do to make myself, you know, how I feel the best, is really important. And I think the saying is like, you can't pour from an empty cup, but I think that is the best way to sort of sum it up. And then that links to business, because, you know, in business there's so many different things that you have to do all the time, so having a priority list of what's actually the most important is the best thing to do. And also knowing yourself, because I don't know if you ever go on like LinkedIn or something, but there's endless advice of what you should be doing, and it's much easier and better for you if you just know yourself and know what to cut out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that you're using your chronic pain, chronic illness to take care of yourself and
Mm.
still managing to run this business. So what's it been like to work and to run this business since you made these adjustments and this mindset adjustment?
Yeah, I think I've always been an ambitious person, and previously, when I was feeling, you know, chronic pain and fatigue and stuff, I felt like I was holding myself back, even though it wasn't me, it was endometriosis, but I felt very held back. And that then subsequently affected my mental health, which I think it affects a lot of people with chronic illnesses' mental health, because you know, you can be so frustrated, you feel guilty, you feel like, what did I do to deserve this, or have I done something to bring this on? And so I used to, you know, just be able to do kind of the bare minimum in my business. So that would usually be, you know, focusing on client work, and then I'd stop for the day. Whereas now, I don't have to take naps during the day. You know, I don't really have like brain fog or anything like that. So I can push myself a lot more in terms of, you know, getting my business to where I want it to be. So I could, for example, do client work, business development, and then some networking in one day. And that makes
Wow.
a world of difference, because it makes me feel like I'm progressing more, which is what I want out of life. I don't feel like I'm being held back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what kind of advice would you have for people who are really struggling with fatiguing themselves and they're about to burn out from just overdoing it?
Hmm. I think the first thing I'd say is, you know, to think about, I mean, this is kind of a harsh way to say it, but to think about the consequences.
Hmm.
So I know sometimes I used to want to really push myself, but the consequences would mean that I'd be put out for a couple of days, like you mentioned, with your trip. Realistically, you know what's gonna happen if you do that. And I think understanding yourself and being kind to yourself and knowing what you need, and then giving yourself permission to have it, is the first thing. The second thing I'd say is, I know that the UK and US healthcare systems are very different. So
Hmm.
if your American listeners are able to go to the doctor, I would say keep pushing until you get an answer, because you completely deserve it. And even if there's no, you know, sort of cure for it, having an answer and being able to explain what it is so much easier than just saying to people, well, I've got this symptom and this symptom and this symptom, and I don't know what's going on. You know, if you
Hmm.
just say, I've got like fibromyalgia, like you mentioned, or something like that, then that sort of lifts a bit of the mental weight off of it. And then the last thing I'd say is, if you can, look into different options. I don't know if maybe that's a nutritionist, or like something else I tried, for example, was acupuncture or
Hmm.
things like that, and being open to it. I think we're all different, and I think given that the little amount that's known about chronic illness and problems, you should give yourself the option, you know, of exploring as many avenues as possible to find out what might help.
Right. I I try to remember doctors, don't know everything. They're frequently wrong. And like I've done acupuncture and I do different, more natural modalities and try different things, because, our bodies were meant to have good nutrition and we were meant to take care of ourselves. And, I things that have been working over in, Asia for thousands and thousands, maybe longer than that of years, So, definitely I'd say also, I agree, be open to different treatment modalities. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? It's not going to work. Well, you're just right back where you started. But the best thing that could happen is maybe it will help. And even if it doesn't completely go away, because you've still got a chronic condition, at least maybe it can make it manageable.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And if you do find something, then that's also a little bit of hope, which I think is
Yes.
the key thing that you kind of need to hold on to, is that is hope, and it's none of it is your fault.
Right. Yeah. Hope is definitely important. Like when I was struggling with my migraines and my headaches for 20 years, I had completely lost hope, and it was crazy because I was thinking, I don't think that I'm such a special person, that I've got some kind of rare issue that nobody can figure out. I just didn't think that. I just thought
Mm.
we're missing a puzzle piece, right? So little by little, my puzzle pieces were kind of coming together. And then the big puzzle piece I was missing was the PTSD and trauma and emotional component of my pain. And so I'm working through that, but also remember that, according to research, 50 to 80% of chronic pain or physical pain is from emotion. So if you've got some kind of trauma or PTSD or complex PTSD or whatever it is, anxiety, depression, um, try to see somebody. There's lots of different ways to help. There are other things besides talk therapy if that's not something that you desire. There's EMDR therapy where you don't have to talk it all out. There's meditation, there's journaling, there's all sorts of other stuff out there that can help. So tell us a little bit more about your business and where we can find you. Where can we follow you?
So I run a social media agency that's called Meaningful Marketing. I do it with my partner, who's called Sam. We describe ourselves as a forward-thinking social media agency that puts the consumer first. So our tagline is putting the soul back into the scroll, which I think sums up what we do.
Yeah.
And we work with both B2B and B2C businesses. And we work with businesses not just in the UK, but everywhere. Our website is www.meaningfulmarketing.org, or you could find us on Instagram, which is @meaningfulmarketingagency.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
You can find me at ithurtstomom.com and at ithurtstomom on Instagram and Facebook. You can also email me at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you.